In this video, I'm going to be sharing the frugal living hacks that I learned while living in Istanbul for 3 years. So I wasn't working as much when I was living in Istanbul. I was on the digital nomad visa as well, so it wasn't like I could go out and pick up local work if I needed to. So while I was living there, I really made an effort to have as low cost of living as possible. And I'm not Turkish, but I lived by myself in a studio apartment, and I also lived with a Turkish family. So this is really kind of like my observations from being integrated in Turkish culture and also just navigating life there on my own. So just to be clear, I'm not saying that these are universally Turkish habits or inherently Turkish habits, but they are the habits that I picked up while living life in Istanbul, spending time with my ex-boyfriend's family, especially his mom, and just kind of trying to navigate life and integrate myself as best as I could, while also trying to save money. And honestly, living in Türkiye for 3 years really changed me for the better. I feel like I became so much more community-minded while I was there. Like, when I was living in North America, I think I was more individualistic. And living there really changed my perspective on the importance of leaning into community. I think it also made me more open-minded, with less kind of Western puritanical worldviews and just more empathetic towards different people and different ways of living. And of course, living abroad for the first time kind of changed me as well. Just navigating life on my own in an environment that wasn't familiar to me obviously changed me, and I think changed me for the better. But in this video, I'm really focusing on the money saving tricks that I learned while navigating life abroad and trying to integrate myself into Turkish culture. So let's get into it. So the first frugal living hack that I picked up almost immediately was that you're never supposed to waste bread or really any kind of food. I think this stems from Islam, where it's considered haram to waste, especially bread. So basically, if you have bread that's going bad, you should use it for like breadcrumbs or croutons or feed it to animals. For me, that looked like just buying less and using up everything I had in a couple of days. So my apartment in Istanbul didn't have a big fridge. I had a mini fridge with no freezer. So I kind of just did my groceries every day and bought what I needed to make meals for that evening or that morning, whatever it was. And that eliminated food waste pretty easily. And the next one is drinking more tea than coffee. So my ex-boyfriend was a tour guide, Turkish tour guide, and he explained to me that during the fall of the Ottoman Empire, coffee became too expensive to drink regularly, and that's kind of when tea culture in the country took off. So even though Turkish coffee is pretty famous, Turkish tea now has become obviously just as or more famous. And when I was living there, I was definitely drinking way more tea than coffee. I think that's a universal experience. And the next one is that I realized that it's not normal, like it is in North America, to have alcohol with dinners regularly. So like by regularly, I mean like, you know how here it's so normal to just pour a glass of wine while cooking, or like if you're going out to eat in a restaurant, it pretty much goes without saying that you're going to order some sort of an alcoholic beverage to go with your meal. But in Istanbul, it's not really like that. Like obviously people still drink alcohol. You can go to a meyhane and like drink as much rakı as you want or whatever, like have beers on a patio, which I obviously did. But really just like getting out of the habit of assuming just because I was going out for a meal in a sit-down restaurant, it didn't mean that I had to order alcohol. And actually a lot of restaurants in Istanbul, they don't always serve alcohol in the way that they do in North America. So that saved a ton of money and was also great for my health. The next one is leaning into home cooked meals with simple ingredients. So yes, Turkish cuisine is elaborate. You can find many elaborate things, but I feel like the daily home cooked meals focus more on fresh vegetables and rice. So some of the things that I learned to make that I loved making and I still make are salateli pilav, which is basically just rice with cucumber and tomato. That was my favorite thing to make and also my favorite thing to order for a quick meal when I was out. and also dishes that are called zeytinyağlı, which is basically just like fresh vegetables and olive oil and a little bit of tomato paste, like cooked on the stove and served with rice. They're so simple, but they're so good for you, especially in Istanbul, where you can get really fresh and delicious produce at the market, not like in North America. But that was kind of something that saved my budget a lot, and also sort of helped me realize that cooking doesn't always have to be a big elaborate affair. Like, those kinds of dishes don't take a lot of time to prepare for the most part, and once you learn to make them, they're pretty easy to make. And I feel like before I started learning to make those, I really thought that you had to, I don't know, like really go all out when it comes to like garnishes and food prep and all these things. But realizing that you can make delicious and easy meals with fresh vegetables and olive oil basically was a game changer, and also great for my budget. Along with that is always preparing food for travel. So one of my favorite things, and honestly the memories that I hold dearest to me from my entire experience in Istanbul, was learning to make sarma with my ex-boyfriend's mom before traveling. So the two of us would stay up until like 3 a.m. rolling these sarmas, like using the vine leaves and packing them with rice, and I was weirdly good at it, but she taught me how to do it. And even though I didn't really speak that much Turkish at the time, it's like we had such a fun time just doing that together and bonding over rolling the sarma for the road trips that we were taking. And I will hold that dear to me for probably the rest of my life, honestly. It was such a pure moment, and it helped that I was weirdly good at rolling sarma. Like, everyone was very impressed. They asked me if I rolled cigarettes, like if that's why I was so good at rolling sarma, which I didn't roll cigarettes. I guess I was just like, I don't know, I was good at it, and it was so fun and such a sweet memory that I have. But the point of that story is just like, when you're going on a road trip or you're traveling or whatever, it's normal to make your own food before leaving. And my ex-boyfriend's mom would even brew tea and bring like a big thermos of tea that would last us for like the entire road trip. And I feel like before that, it was so normal for me to just buy food on the go, like stop at a convenience store and buy like whatever kind of crappy stuff was available just for fuel. But preparing food at home to bring for travel is like a great way to cut down the cost when you're traveling. And the next one is investing instead of holding on to cash. So I feel like I can't really make a Turkish frugal living video without acknowledging the Turkish economy and the lira depreciation. So from what I learned from my Turkish friends, it's that you never just hold on to cash, especially in lira. A lot of people invest in gold, or they'll change their money to a different currency. And for me, that really changed the way that I saw saving money. So yes, I was still working on debt payoff, but I was really conscious to not leave any large sums of cash just sitting in my bank account. Instead, they would get invested or go directly to debt payoff. So the next ones really focus on community, which, as sad as it is to say, I feel like I did not value in the same way before living in Türkiye. So one of the biggest takeaways is leaning into community and giving back to your community as well. I feel like watching my ex-boyfriend and the Turkish people that I got to know while living in Istanbul, it was like so clear that they were comfortable leaning on each other and also giving to each other when anyone was in need or needed a place to stay. That's kind of like another big one that I noticed while I was there. So I was living with my ex-boyfriend for a while, and whenever his friends would come to Istanbul, they would always just sleep on his couch. Like, it wasn't even a question. And when we would go visit his friends, we would stay in their house too. And it sounds so basic, but I was kind of snobby, I think, before I moved to Istanbul. Like, if I had friends coming to stay with me or coming to visit Montreal, like, my first question would be like, oh cool, what hotel are you staying at? And I realized that that is such a cold way to live. So Now that I'm back in Montreal, I live in a tiny studio, as I've mentioned in other videos. I have this little couch that I'm sitting on, but I always have it open. Like, I have an open door policy for friends visiting, or like if anyone needs to stay the night for any reason, my couch is always open. And I really wasn't like that before moving. Like, I had close friendships, but I just feel like I was hesitant to break down the barrier to actually treat my friends like they were family, I guess. And I'm really grateful that has changed for me, because it's really deepened my friendships. And I feel like, I don't know, I felt more comfortable staying at friends' places when they offer a couch or a spare bedroom to me when I'm traveling too. And I just think that not only is it a money saving tip, it's also just like a better way of living. Like, I feel closer to my friends now, and it's just, I'm grateful for it. Another one which I really love is board games as entertainment. So I feel like it's kind of weird, but I love like the older generation of Turkish men, which sounds so weird, but you always see them spending hours in tea houses playing backgammon and just drinking tea and catching up with their buddies. And I think that is like such a pure and sweet way to spend the afternoon. And it's not just the older generation either. I played so much backgammon when I was living in Istanbul. Like, it's so normal to just catch up with friends and play board games. And I know that that's kind of pretty common in North America too, but I feel like the board game culture, specifically out in third places or third spaces, I forget what that term is, but basically leaving your house to go to a place to drink a couple glasses of tea in public and play board games with your friends. It's just valued there so much more, and it's a really budget-friendly activity that gets you out of the house and socializing. And I always joked with my Turkish friends, like, I want to be invited into one of those tea houses, but they're basically only for old Turkish men. So sadly, I never realized that goal, but maybe one day. And the last one is not really necessarily about Turkish culture, but it is about my experience living abroad. So basically, I learned to lean into the budget-friendly grocery stores and also off-brands without really knowing that I was doing it. So my favorite grocery store in my neighborhood was called Ayu's Beer, which is like basically a No Frills in Canada, or a Maxi here in Quebec. Like, it's really the lowest, one of the lowest in terms of price points for grocery stores. And I didn't know really, like, I didn't know its reputation until I had Turkish friends being like, why are you shopping at Ayu's Beer? Like, what's going on? But I don't know, I liked it. The prices were cheap, the produce was fine. And then along with that, I had friends ask me similar questions about the brands that I was buying, because even though there are a lot of similar brands in Türkiye as here, a lot of them are also different. So for things like laundry detergent, or even like pastas and kind of, a lot of stuff like that, it's like I didn't know which brands were perceived as good and which ones were perceived as kind of like the budget end of things, the way that I do just inherently in Canada. So for most of my time there, I was just buying like the cheapest thing, or like the thing that seemed the most promising based on just looking at it and using it when I got back home. And I feel like that made me, after my friends pointed out that some of the brands I was buying were kind of weird, but I didn't care. I kept buying them. And even back in Canada now, like, I'm not shy to buy the no-name brands. I don't really care. If I get them home and they taste good, I'll buy them again. And I definitely was not like that before I moved to Istanbul. So it doesn't really have to do with Turkish culture, but it does have to do with my growth, I guess, living there. But yeah, so those are the main things that I learned in terms of frugal living while living in Istanbul. I feel like it was half just being exposed to Turkish culture, like intimately through my friends and my ex-boyfriend's family, and also just kind of like navigating life abroad by myself. Being on a digital nomad visa and having to be really mindful of my spending. It was a great learning experience, and I'm really grateful that I have those takeaways now that I can still kind of like put to work in my day-to-day life. Yeah, memories. Anyway, if you've watched this far in the video, thank you so much for watching. If you have any questions about life in Istanbul, let me know. I would love to talk about it more on this channel. I really miss living there. But yeah, thanks so much for watching. Don't forget to subscribe, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.